To start, I'd ask you both how just COVID has changed your day to day. We've been in this situation for about 8 months now. So, what are some of the key pivots you'd like to share with the group?
I think one of the key differences is definitely the transition from face-to-face interaction to a more digital-based interaction. Teams would originally meet in meetings, but that sort of work is done digitally now. So I think that's a major change. I think it's also helpful because it helps you to, improve your communication skills. So you need to communicate your points in a much more succinct or brief manner.
Yeah, at my company, we used to do a lot of face-to-face meetings or like popping into people's cubicles and like asking them a question. And so we've had to learn to transition to like short meetings or chat, which is something we didn't really use before. And I've been working kind of a hybrid, so I get to go into the lab if I have to, and the rest of my time is spent at home. And so that's been an interesting transition.
So Nathan, let's start with you for this next question about why you wanted to go into design specifically. Can you walk us through what your thinking was there?
Yeah, so I did a PhD, and that was more research based, and I like the aspects of kind of solving problems or creating a design from scratch. And that's why I kind of wanted to go into design engineering, is because like in my work, we essentially go from one line idea to full working system in about 2 years. And so I think that's really interesting. I have my hands on a lot of different pieces. The project, you kind of follow the project all the way through. And so you see all those phases, and that's really interesting. And then there's always some sort of like, we want to develop a new technology, and that's also part of my job. So just a lot of different buckets, and I like solving problems.
Excellent. Salman, what about you?
So I think back in my undergrad as well as during my master's, I had a strong research experience as well as industry experience through my internship and co-op. But I think the motivating factor which led me to industry was that I wanted to create products for end users, for customers. And I saw that within the industry, there was a faster rate of developing these products. And that's why I ended up choosing industry as my career path.
Gotcha. And speaking of industry, we know that many changes are afoot right now. I think one of them, we have several questions about automation and machine learning coming in. So Nathan, why don't we start with you on this? How do you think AI and machine learning is going to change your field specifically?
I think that's kind of hard for me for my, one aspect that has changed a lot is that we're now using a lot more simulation. And so my company used to be very like tinkering based. So it would be a lot of trial and error. And now we're looking into doing like full simulations before we even start our like hands-on process. As far as like AI and automation, I don't think eventually that will change how we do manufacturing, but right now our manufacturing is very hands-on, and I don't see that changing anytime soon.
Thanks. Solomon, same question for your area.
So I think like Nathan mentioned, AI and machine learning right now on the manufacturing side, it's still more hands-on. But I think as an engineer, if you still end up developing those skills, they will prove helpful within the industry. Like a lot of companies have started automating tasks which they originally required engineers to do. So maybe you end up creating code in MATLAB, you end up creating code in Python. So that sort of skills are transferable definitely. So I think it would be nice to get some experience in that as well.
Well, yeah, I see a good segue here in the chat about, which computer languages are you most familiar with? You mentioned a couple of different softwares, but are you finding that when you talk to colleagues or friends that there's more of an emphasis of this in school, or is it once you get out of school? What have you found? We'll start with Salman on that one.
So I think I use MATLAB quite often, and I think it is a strong foundation, definitely used in the at your bachelor's level or at your master's level. So I think that's some skill which every engineer should know before they graduate. In addition, I would recommend learning either Python or C++, since they are picking up pace within the industry, even for mechanical engineers.
Yeah, and I've been also used MATLAB. Sorry, I also use MATLAB regularly, mostly for data processing, and that's just because I'm kind of used to it. But a lot of people are coming out of college with some sort of Python or C++ or something like that experience, and Python's really becoming much more common in industry. For one thing, because it's essentially free, and MATLAB is not. And so that just like, especially in like robotics, it's kind of popping up all over the place. And then like other simulation, like coding tools, I use LabVIEW a lot, which is a lot less like raw line coding. It's more block coding, but we use that all the time. And then for simulation, we use Modelica, which is kind of a block programming to some extent, and that's really for like system modeling. And so all these things, I don't think you necessarily have to know any single one of them if you have exposed. I mean, all of them. I think if you have a good exposure to one of them, you can transfer that knowledge. Even if you're transferring from line coding to block coding, you at least know kind of the process of the thought process of coding, which is very beneficial.
Yeah, Nathan, you've mentioned modeling and simulation a couple times now, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention ASME's work in this space. As a standards organization, we're developing standards that can help engineers on the floor, have a better understanding way ahead of time, and perhaps in a much safer context. So it's a really exciting time for that as we're reimagining things. And I see a question here about that type of reimagination. What if the industry doesn't want to innovate? So it's a really cool question. So how do you, as an employee or as a leader within your company, how do you help an organization move in a different direction if there's a lot of resistance to that type of innovation?
Well, I would focus on pointing out all the problems that can be eliminated by doing some good upfront simulation work. And so if you get to the point where you have prototypes that are coming off of tools and it's not functioning as you expected, right there is a huge expense that could have been saved by doing a lot of upfront simulation work. And I think right there, if you do that more than once, that's going to convince people that you need to innovate a little better.
Salman, anything to add there?
Sure. So I think you should always feel free to express your opinion. I think that's really important. If you don't express what you think is right, then no one's really going to know what your ideas are. And I think if you feel that you're not being heard, then maybe you should spend some more time in creating some sort of, a simulation or a model so you can actually demonstrate what the benefits are. And I think that would help convince your team, your managers, that may be the right path to adopt.
Yeah, I agree with that. So showing them the data really convinces people.
Right. And then it becomes a lot less subjective and you can have more of an objective way of presenting that information. We have a question here from someone who graduated undergrad in 2015. So it's been 5 years now, and they're asking specifically about design. And so in their current position, they don't feel like there's much design. And so what kind of technical skills can be developed while basically on the job so that this person can stay up to date and brush up on their skills? Do you have any recommendations for that type of scenario?
So I think firstly, you should be on the lookout for different projects or different opportunities within your team and outside your team as well. And sometimes it's all about just saying, I would like to take up that task or that ownership. So if you feel that you're interested in brushing up some simulation skills and you feel maybe one of your team members needs some hand, then why not go ahead and give them some help? So in that ways, you can learn from them as well as brush up your own skills. And the same applies to other tasks such as normal design engineering based tasks, or maybe some testing, verification, making reports, data analysis. I think if you would like to build on that, then you should be ready to volunteer at your work.
That's great hands-on advice. Nathan, anything to add there? Not too much. I completely agree. Just reach out to what's around you, but make sure your manager's aligned with that. If you don't want to start tacking on work that is not aligned with the work that you're supposed to be doing. So just be careful with that. But generally, I think if you express to your manager that you want some more development and that can be found in-house, that should be supported.
So we are at a Efest event right now, and unfortunately, it's not an in-person one because we know that that's where all the excitement and passion comes from, specifically with our competition. So can you talk a little bit about what types of design skills are helpful? Both of you have been involved with Efest, and so just with that, with the challenge and the competition angle, what are you learning in the moment, and how are some of those ASME Efest skills applicable to your jobs now?
Well, I think a lot of the hands-on work in general, not just at Efest, we offer a lot of those hands-on things, as well as like the CAD battle, which is and IM3D, like as examples. Those are like both like drawing tools as well as hands-on work. I think a great thing that like really helps me is just kind of experience with hands-on work, and so being able to think ahead and like what's going to catch you later. Thinking through like how this thing's going to function and where the interference is going to be, what's going to happen with the materials, all that stuff is hard to take just from your learning. It really takes experience, and I think so as getting as much hands-on experience as you can, like actually going through and designing something is going to benefit you.
Thanks. Salman, any additions there?
So I think Nathan made some really good points. But in addition to the technical skills, I think I've learned a lot of soft skills as well. So I've been associated with the HPVC event for the past 3 years, and I've learned a lot about managing responsibilities, looking after timelines, ensuring things are on time. So I think I've developed ownership skills, which are really important within the industry as well. So that's one of my key developments from involvement in ASME.
Well, talk a little bit more about that. How are you more effective at managing some of those different personalities or dynamics that pop up, especially in the competition sense, which can often get very competitive and really passionate? So what have you learned maybe in that sense, those softer skills that you can't really learn from a textbook? Salman, you want to field that one?
Yeah, sure. So I think in terms of managing different personalities, I think you always have to be calm and patient, and you do have to appreciate the diverse viewpoints of various competitors. But we are guided by the rules and regulations for the competition, and we use that as the basis for guiding us and moving along the right path.
Nathan, what about your soft skills experience, and has ASME helped develop any of those that you otherwise didn't learn in college?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, being on a team, whether it's like a competition team or like a committee, there's always kind of anticipating potential like failures and like looking for people that are succeeding and trying to promote those. And so it definitely, like, you have to learn to work with different kinds of people, and you have to kind of plan ahead and set your schedules and your expectations based on that, especially based on how kind of how different people may behave, and especially in volunteering. So in volunteering, like, we all have jobs or other things, other responsibilities, and that's something that I've kind of had to adjust to sometimes with like expectations.
Yeah, I think setting those expectations is key, and sometimes that has to happen right there in the moment, which again you can't learn in a book as well. So speaking of setting expectations and shifting gears, there's a question in the chat now about transitioning from one industry to another. So either in your own experience or in coworkers or colleagues or friends, do you have any strategies or advice for changing gears and sometimes making that uncertain leap into a different industry and maybe one you're unfamiliar with? We'll start with Salman on that one.
So I think in my case, I was actually working as a mechanical design engineer right after my undergrad, and currently I'm working within the mechatronic system field. So I think I did make that transition between the two different industries, and I think my guiding factor was my master's degree. So I think that really helped me. That helped give me the push to basically make the transition and demonstrate that I do have the skills in order to succeed in the industry. So even if a master's degree isn't an option, then I know that there are several courses online. There are several websites which you can go through, take up workshops, and build some experience, which will really highlight when you're transitioning to another industry.
Thanks so much, Nathan. Same question, and also, how are you able to leverage that previous experience into the next chapter?
Yeah, so I've done some transitions. For one thing, I went from teaching into industry, and or like research into teaching into industry. And I think the biggest thing is that, like, especially if you're several years out of school, like I am, it's hard because they kind of expect you to be at a certain level. They don't want to expect you to be entry level, and so what you have to do is rely on those overlaps that you have. So like for me, I had kind of like design experience with like fluids and heat transfer, and so I really like heavily rely on those things, and that helped me get my foot in the door. And now I'm working in an industry. For one thing, I'm working in industry, but I'm also working on a lot of other things related to product manufacturing and design that I had never done before. And so you really have to convince them that you have some sort of base of knowledge that's going to get you in the door. But then once you get there, you have to kind of show that you're flexible to learn new things. So I think those are two things, and that took a while for me to kind of figure out like how to explain how my past experience applies to this new thing that I haven't worked in before.